And now I would like to introduce the moderator for this session, Herb Klotz. He's currently the Zone 32 Rotary Coordinator, which covers the Northeast United States, and he's responsible for promoting membership growth. He and Terry presented these 5 attributes at the International Convention in Houston, and I'm so grateful that this team of membership growth specialists came to Rotary with the idea for a series where some of these ideas could be shared with the larger Rotary world. So welcome, Herb and friends.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Leanne. And what I would like to do first is to introduce my co-presenters. So first we have Louisa Horn, and Louisa is from Nova Scotia in Canada. So Louisa.
Thanks, Herb. I'm thrilled to be part of the webinar series and welcome everyone that's joining us. It's going by so fast, I can't keep track of where everyone is from, but it's great to see such a great turnout. I'm here as the Innovative Club Advocate Lead for Zones 28 and 32. And not everyone may be familiar with Innovative Club Advocates, but we basically respond and are proactively involved in clubs and districts that want to do innovative growth, and we support that. And so we're delighted to be part of this webinar today. Thanks, Herb.
Well, thanks, Louisa. And next we have Doug Logan. Doug Logan is from Ontario in Canada. So Doug.
Thanks, Herb. Hi, everybody. I'm the Rotary Coordinator for Zone 28. Basically, that means I'm the membership champion for most of the clubs in Canada, plus Alaska, and a few areas of northern parts of the United States. And I'm looking forward to sharing this wonderful information with all of you.
Thanks, Doug. And finally, Terry Weaver. Terry is from South Carolina in the United States. So Terry.
Thanks, Herb. I'm the Zone 33 Rotary Coordinator, and Zone 33 is Herb's neighboring zone to the south. Our territory stretches from western Pennsylvania down the Atlantic seaboard to the Georgia-South Carolina border.
So thank you, Terry. All right, so let's get started. As Leanne mentioned, this is going to be a 3-part series. Today, we're going to be talking about attributes of successful and agile clubs. On the 28th of September, we're going to be giving a webinar entitled Work Smarter, Not Harder to Grow Your Club. And it is based on the premise that, which is true, which is every Rotary club is different. And really what we need to do is focus on where our opportunities are in our club to grow. And we're going to talk to you a good bit about that in September. And then finally, on November 9th, we have a webinar entitled What Comes Next? Now, today we're talking about Agile clubs. In September, we're going to be talking about what makes your club unique. And we're going to pull that all together in November with a final webinar. And we hope you're able to join us for all 3 of our webinars. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is, okay, we're here to talk about membership. Well, why? Why grow membership? What is so important about membership in Rotary? And of course, the reality is our most important asset in Rotary is our members. We are a membership organization, and our product is service. And what we've learned is there are a lot of different things we can focus on in Rotary, but if we focus on membership and membership growth, a lot of the other things will fall into place just naturally, because we'll have more members, we'll have more ideas, and we'll be able to make a greater impact. So next, what I'd like to do is I'd like to involve our 3 panelists a little bit in the discussion before we get into the discussion on attributes of growing and agile clubs. And first, I'd like to ask Terry a question. Terry, why does Rotary lose the same number of members that we bring in each year?
Well, Herb, that's an interesting question. And I think I'd like to turn it around. Let's ask Terry, why does Rotary bring in only the same number of members we lose each year? Well, in my opinion, it has to do with Rotary's biggest enemy, which is not Kiwanis. Our biggest enemy is complacency, underscored by a statement like, our club is just the right size. We just want to stabilize our membership. And that's because we have a break-even mentality rather than a growth strategy. And you know what happens if you don't have a growth strategy? You shrink. Happens in a business, happens in a Rotary club. See, here's the deal. If you have a break-even mentality, if your entire aspiration is break even, you'll hardly ever overshoot that. And you'll more than seldom, you're going to fail, resulting in a net loss of a member or two. So the next year, same plan, same strategy, lather, rinse, repeat. And guess what? Same outcome, a net loss of 1 or 2 members. So why does Rotary bring in only the same number of members we lose each year? Because we have this break-even mentality rather than a growth strategy. A break-even mentality will always result in a shrinking organization. Now, it's not that there aren't more prospects out there. If we can find 160,000 new Rotarians in a year, we can find 170,000. We just stop short when it looks like success is in sight. And then those last-minute terminations catch us by surprise. So I really think complacency is the culprit. We just need to set our sights higher.
All right, well, thanks, Terry. And now I want to get Doug involved a little bit. So Doug, here's a question for you. What can clubs achieve with clear goals and individualized data?
So what we want people to be thinking about is working smarter and not harder. And what we mean by that is that we think the actions that clubs should take ought to be built on that club's unique history, culture, and community. Generic strategies that don't account for those differences may not be that helpful. So let me give you a few examples to illustrate what I mean by that. In the form you filled out to register for the seminar, you asked a number of different questions. One of those questions was, why are you telling us the same answers every year? If it works, our membership should have grown. Well, I got curious about that person in that club. I don't know him or her or where their club is. But I was able to learn that that club loses 4 members per year more than they bring in. Something is causing members to leave. In contrast, another person asked, how do you get diversity of membership when the community you're in is very homogenous? Again, I don't know that person or that club, but I did find their data, which shows that they've actually been growing a little bit every year over the last few years, which suggests maybe they don't have the problem that they think they do. A third club was asked how online clubs can better connect with their members. Well, this is a 3-year-old passport club, and believe it or not, they bring in 11 new members every year for each person that they lose. So when you think about, and when we think about working smarter, we mean to focus on understanding your own unique circumstances and creating solutions that make sense for you, not another club with different problems. Finally, keep in mind that old saying that someone said, we can do anything we want to do, we just can't do everything. So we need to be strategic about what we do, especially for those of you who are in smaller clubs. In a few minutes, Herb is going to spend some time talking about the results of the survey we completed and the 5 attributes of successful and agile clubs. And what we want you to do is not to be afraid to pick and choose and adapt and find the best way to make them work for you. Thanks, Herb.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, and one more question for Louisa. Louisa, why do some clubs seem to thrive even in the face of a pandemic?
Such a great question. And we know that despite what many clubs have experienced, a lot have actually been able to thrive and grow. And of course, you're going to hear more about that as we proceed today. And you'll hear more about what you can do in the follow-up sessions as well. But I think, Terry referred to having that growth strategy. And Doug talked about different clubs having different ways of doing things. I think the word that is most important to me in all of this is really around intention. Those clubs have the intention to do something different. They're people of action. So this year they're imagining and they're bringing their intention to bear. And of course, all of that is going to be based on thinking as well about our strategic priorities. And you'll see how those link to what Herb is going to describe today. And I've taken those strategic priorities and just reworded them a little bit because it makes it easier to remember. I like to have easy ways to remember things. And so the 4 strategic priorities that Rotary has, I've made into an acronym LEAD. And let's just quickly look at what those are. The L is actually for leadership, but leadership for impact. If what we're doing doesn't have impact, our intentions need to adjust a little bit to make sure that they do. E for engagement. And you'll hear some ways that people did some creative things for engaging their members even during a pandemic. And then, of course, A is for being agile, adaptive. We've all had to do that, and some have done it in ways that have been more effective than others. So you'll hear a bit more about that today. And then finally, D, I adjusted this one a little bit. The Rotary priority is around reach, but I think reach in particular for us needs to include all of the lenses of diversity. Plus that gave me the word lead, so that was another reason to change it. But having that lens of diversity that covers all kinds of different types of diversity, as Doug said about the club that said they were in an area where there wasn't much. There always is, whether it's gender, age, education background, career type. So many ways we can look at that. So we're going to drill down on some of those over the next couple of sessions a bit more. And now you're going to have the opportunity to hear the specifics about the 5 attributes from Herb.
Well, thanks a lot, Louisa. And as Louisa, and thank you, Doug and Terry. And they'll be back at the end for the Q&A. But now what we want to do is we want to, for the next 15 to 20 minutes or so, talk to you about attributes of successful and agile clubs. Now, this isn't just our opinions on this. This was based on a study that we did last year. Now, that study was done across Rotary zones 28 and 32. And just to remind you, that is the Northeast United States, virtually all of Canada, the state of Alaska, and the state of Michigan. And it's over 2,000 Rotary clubs in those 2 zones. And what we were doing was we were looking for clubs that had grown significantly during the pandemic year. Now, the pandemic year was a brutal year for membership in North America. In fact, we lost about 5% net membership during that year, that 2020-21 year. And yet these clubs used the pandemic as an opportunity for growth, not as an excuse. And so we wanted to learn more. So our simple criteria was we looked for clubs with a growth of 5+ net members in that year. And then there were about 90 of those clubs. And we sent out an 11-question survey to whoever was the president of that club during that year. And we got us over a 60% response rate to our survey. So what I'm going to be sharing with you over the next 15 minutes is results from about 55 clubs. So it's not my opinion, it's survey results from about 55 clubs. Now we asked open-ended questions, and what we did then was take the results back and aggregate the results. And what surprised us was how easy it was to identify these 5 attributes. So the 5 attributes were: number 1, strong leadership; number 2, many events and projects; Number 3, visibility in their community. Number 4 is what we call active, intentional member engagement. And number 5 was, well, they had clear goals and a growth plan. It didn't happen by accident. So what we're going to do now is go through, deep dive each one of these 5 attributes. The first attribute is leadership. Now, when we talk about leadership, what we're referring to, or at least the style of leadership that these presidents exhibited, was what we'll call servant leadership. They understood the interests and the needs of their club members and of their communities. They worked together to identify what were the best solutions for many of these issues. And of course, it wasn't a one-person decision. It was come to by a group of people. We did a Zoom interview with about 7 of these club presidents. And the good news for you is, well, you're going to hear more from me, but you're also going to hear from them. So let's hear a little bit from some of these club presidents about what they had to say about leadership.
Leadership involves sort of having a vision or embracing a vision and moving your club and the members towards pursuing that vision in a way that makes them feel important and a part of the process.
The leadership is a little bit different, I think, in Rotary than it may be somewhere else. It certainly has to be distributed.
Leadership is all about getting people to say, yes, I will own some specific result, so that they are then leading a particular effort.
It's not my club, it's not the president's club, it's the members' club.
Because of COVID, we have to reimagine everything that we do.
How do you bring people from where they are to a new place? That's the kind of leadership I think we have to have in Rotary.
It's really important in order to do that, that you be able to listen and to be fluid with what's going on with other people in your community.
And we're here for the community. So just constantly thinking about that, to me, that's what leadership meant to me.
Okay, the second attribute was these clubs were active in their local communities. They held many highly visible service projects. Now, sometimes we hear about clubs that have one big project that they do during the year. Well, that really wasn't the case for these clubs. They were active. They were doing things monthly and sometimes more frequently than monthly in their communities. Over 2/3 of them indicated to us that their events and their service projects, they use them to target new member attraction. So while, having service projects is a very important foundation for growing a Rotary Club, if only Rotarians attend those events, well, the chances of growing your club aren't as good. And so they use these events to target new members. And what a great way to learn about a Rotary Club is through one of their service projects. In addition to that, several of the clubs talked about holding member informational events or Rotary informational events. And some of them were in the park, some of them were on Zoom, purposely targeting people in the community to learn more about Rotary and find out if they would be interested in joining. Now, the next attribute that I want to talk about is visibility in the community. Well, now, if you have all these service projects and all these events that you're holding and you've got a really fun Rotary Club, well, everybody needs to know about it. So making sure that others know what you're doing in your community. Now, the survey results were very clear on this. Now, while many of the clubs talked about many different ways to promote public image in their community, by far, the most prevalent example that they were providing in the surveys was use of social media. It was probably about 80% of the responses when we looked for visibility in the community category. Now, what I want to do now is I want to tell you a story. One of the things, I've given this talk many different times, and one of the many times after I give the talk, a president of a small club comes up to me and they say, Herb, you know, we're a small club. This is all great, but we can't focus on all these things. What should we focus on? And so I want to tell you a story about the Percy Rotary Club. Now, the Percy Rotary Club was in Eastern Pennsylvania, and they were a club which I would call a small but mighty club. Now, most of the members of the club were middle-aged. They were like 40, 50, 60 years old. That was the typical age of the group. They had 12 members, and they were extremely active in their community and doing community service. The problem was very few people knew about it. And one day they learned about a Facebook group that promoted community service projects in their community. And they started posting their community service events on that Facebook group. And people started to show up. And then they found out what a fun group this was to be with, and people started joining their club. Now, I could tell this story in a lot more detail, but I really don't have the time right now. But I remember talking to the president of this club, and he told me, he says, you know, Herb, before we started with the Facebook and getting people involved, we really didn't have anybody in our club with really good social media skills, but we do now. And that club during the pandemic grew from 12 to 26 members. And I'm an optimist, but I'm pretty sure they're on their way to 40. And that's great, because given the size of that community, they can use a Rotary Club with about 40 members. All right, so let's go on now. The next attribute I want to talk about is what we call active, intentional member engagement. These clubs didn't let their members fall through the cracks. In fact, they switched over almost immediately from live to virtual meetings, and they had different formats for their meetings. Sometimes they would meet on Zoom, sometimes they'd meet in a park, maybe they'd meet for a service project. But the common theme was we were meeting on a regular basis to help our community and to build fellowship. Another thing that they talked about was they made sure that that when they brought in a new member, they learned about what that member's interest was, helped them learn a little bit more about Rotary, and got them involved in something that they were interested in, so that they were engaged and they stayed involved. Another thing I would share about engagement was there were a number of clubs in this category that really took advantage of Zoom. And now they can invite people from all around the world to their club meetings, and they did it. And they brought in amazing speakers. So let's go back, and we've got a video here from some of the club presidents of these clubs to tell you a little bit about how they focused on member engagement.
And nobody wants to come to a dull party. So the other thing I wanted to do was make sure that we focused on fun.
Every month, I had a Zoom call, which later became an in-person meeting once a month with those new members.
My goal for speakers was to have those who spoke to be entertaining, educational, and informative.
They've sort of formed their own little fellowship amongst themselves. They're now friends, and they go out and have coffees together. And when we do finally get to meet in person, they're going to already know, 12 other people in the club.
We made sure they got engaged in their area of interest. And so we made that a priority. And I'd say that was our primary strategy.
we were very locked down in our community, but we could go for walks. So what we did was to use the focus of the environment to get together in small groups.
We're in the midst of completing our second tree sale, and it was fantastic last year because it was an opportunity to get outside together with each other, meet more members of our own community, and do something good.
We're going to walk along the lakeshore, and we bought garbage bags and gloves and pickers, and we went out. We wore Rotary gear. We took photographs and we put it on social media.
Invite everybody to get involved with anything that's interesting to them, as much or as little as they want. And when they do, welcome them warmly. And if they don't, invite them again to something else, because the way to get involved with Rotary is to get involved with Rotary.
So the way to get involved with Rotary is to get involved with Rotary. I love that quote. Okay, so now our final attribute is clear membership goals and a growth plan. Now, as you can see from the slide, 88% of those 55 clubs that responded to us indicated to us that membership growth was a top priority during the year that they were club president. And so I want to share with you another short story here. I have done this type of survey several times before. And the first time I did it, I was an incoming district membership chair. It was about 6 years ago. And the reason that the governor had asked me to be district membership chair was because our club had grown. But I knew how our club had grown, but I didn't know how other clubs had grown. So what I did was I wanted to learn. And so we went back 5 years, the same kind of survey, looked for clubs that had grown significantly in a given year during those 5 years, and then reached out to whoever was the president, and then get their opinions and get their thoughts through a phone interview. And the thing that I kept hearing over and over and over again, and I wasn't prompting for it, was they would say to me, they say, Herb, when I was club president, membership growth was a top priority in our club. Didn't happen by accident. So not only do they make it a priority, but the next thing they do is they set goals. So 83% of our presidents that responded indicated that they entered their goals in Rotary Club Central, and they were holding the club and themselves accountable for growing their membership. And then finally, 85% of them, well, indicated that they had an active membership committee with multiple members. Well, I guess if membership growth is a top priority, well, you've got to have a plan as well to make that happen. A goal without a plan is just a wish. So, yeah, so no surprise there. At this point, I think we've got one more video. So let's hear from our club presidents about setting goals and building a plan.
We made membership a priority during the pandemic year because it happened to coincide with our centennial.
Membership was a priority to me before I knew we were going to be having a pandemic throughout our entire year.
And 3 years ago, we established 4 strategic goals for that centennial, and one of them was to grow membership in our club.
Equity and diversity was really an important aspect of that.
We wanted to diversify our club. Our club was aging like many clubs. We wanted to inject some youth into our membership and attract new younger members into our club.
One of our cultural goals for the year was to be open to every person, opportunity, and idea.
I wanted to make sure that we created a club that people would want to join, people would want to remain in.
We also wanted to improve the gender balance in our club.
Identify very specific people and put them in very specific roles on the membership committee.
I asked members, can you please think about people in your community that you know, that you think might be good Rotarians, and don't just think about it, ask them to join.
As long as you're making plans to make sure that your membership growth happens, I think it will.
Okay, well, now in summary, the 5 attributes that we identified through this study of 55 Rotary clubs that had grown were strong leadership, many events and projects, visible in their community, they have active, intentional member engagement, and they had clear goals and a growth plan. Now, you've probably heard many of these pieces before, maybe not all together like this. But it doesn't sound like there's no magic bullet here. These are all common sense. These are things that clubs should be thinking about in terms of ways to grow their club. You want a healthy Rotary club. Now, in closing, what I'd like to just say is, there are plenty of people in our communities with a heart for service. That's not where the shortage is. All we need is make sure that we have a club experience and we have a plan to grow our club. And as Louisa Horn would say, we just need to make our clubs irresistible. So thank you very much. And it's time for questions.
Thank you, Herb, so much. And at this point, I would ask Doug and Louisa and Terry to join us again. This is a chance. We've gotten so many great questions and comments throughout the webinar, and we're going to try to answer some of them. But I want to start with some that we received in advance, some themes that we saw that we thought these experts could shed some light on. So, Doug, I want to start with you. Lots of people wanted to know how we differentiate Rotary from other service organizations. So what advice do you have for the way we talk about Rotary to show our value and our unique position in the community and what we have to offer?
Excuse me. Thanks, Leanne. Well, the first part is to say that, as Herb showed when he described the 5 attributes, one of the keys is simply to be seen to be busy doing in the community. But more than that, we can think about creating value as a process of starting to sell what people want to buy instead of a product that we have to sell. So what that means is that we can engage members and potential members in a way that helps us learn what they want to accomplish, the needs that they might want to get satisfied, or even problems that they might want to solve. And then what we do is adjust our priorities to satisfy those. In other words, instead of trying to convince people to fit into our box, why not create another box or even a set of new boxes for people to occupy? And finally, again, to the irresistible word one more time, if we focus on creating a delight-filled membership experience that helps people grow, trust me, the word is going to spread because they're going to talk about it. And if you're seen to be that kind of an organization, that kind of group of people, others are really going to want to become part of it.
Thanks, Doug. Terry, this question's for you. Some folks wanted to know if you had a radical template, a radical idea for how a club could structure as an alternative for an alternative for clubs that are losing members, that have a diminishing membership.
Great question. And of course, the Council on Legislation in 2016 and 2021 both enacted flexibility provisions in the Rotary membership. How about a club that has no meeting? How about a club that has no meal? No bell? No pledge of allegiance? No invocation? No speaker? That club would be called, in this part of the country, an impact club. An impact club is a specific type of companion club, an extension of your club, sort of a service corps And all those members do is community service. So their Rotary experience is focused on, we'll meet to plan a service project, we'll meet to do a service project, but we don't need all that other stuff. Really good example of what Doug's talking about. Let's provide a product that meets them where they are versus try to jam our product down somebody's throat.
Thank you, Terry. Louisa, so many people had questions about recruiting more women or more underrepresented people. So what advice do you have for helping people reach beyond our typical recruitment circles to build these new relationships?
Right. Thanks for that. I love that question. And it begs the start to be, well, what do we mean by typical? What do we do now? We each invite people. We have some events focused on members. We go out and talk to people in other activities that we're doing. Pretty typical stuff. We need to keep doing that. And if it's working, keep doing it. But we also need to think about those other ways of connecting. Doug mentioned adjusting things to be more able to enable the passions of the people that you would like to have involved. It really takes, again, that word I used before, a couple of my favorite words start with I, intentional and irresistible. And then to model that for real. So if you want to attract people that come from a different background, or you want to attract people and be irresistible to people that have different interests, then you need to show that that's actually part of what your club is all about and that you really do want to do that. And looking at some of the older ways that perhaps have been traditions, not that we want to end all the traditions, absolutely not. But look at how to balance those with the kinds of things that will be truly irresistible to people in the future. So we know there are lots of different kinds of alternative clubs. We'll be talking about that. There's lots of information out there about those. Lots of flexibility, as Terry mentioned. All of those things become part of an overall strategy to be intentionally irresistible, not to be out recruiting people. I don't even like the word recruit. It sounds like we're trying to talk people into something. We need to be so attractive and so irresistible that they want to be part of what we're doing.
Thank you, Louisa. Herb, question for you. What advice do you have for restarting and re-energizing a club that has fallen to fewer than 10 members?
Well, thanks. That's a great question, Leanne. I kind of alluded to that a little bit during my presentation. I talked about a club, the Percy Club, that had 12 members and has pretty much, well, more than doubled in size since that time through the pandemic. And really, what did they do? They focused on their assets. They, when you're a small club, you need to really, really understand what are your assets, and then maybe one or two of these attributes that we could focus on to help grow our club and expand our assets. So I want to tell a different story now. I want to tell a story of another very small club. This club was from New Hampshire, and this is a completely different set of assets that this club had. But basically, the president who was coming into the club, the year before he was president, 3 key members of the club left the club because of life happens events. And this club was down to 9 members. Now, this president had been in Rotary for over 30 years, and he had actually, during his 30 years in Rotary, had experienced a club. He was in a club that folded. So he could read the writing on the wall. He could see where this was heading. So the first thing he did, as he explained it to me, was we got the 9 members together. They met, they talked. And again, this was during the pandemic, so they were doing this over Zoom. They set a goal to double their membership. Well, this president was very involved with youth exchange, and him and his wife had hosted many, many youth exchange students over the years. And what they decided to do was to make their Zoom meetings irresistible, as Louisa would say. And he would invite back his past youth exchange students to be the speakers, and they would talk about how Rotary had totally changed their lives. And then he started inviting other speakers as well. But he didn't just have that for the Rotarians in the club. Well, as he explained it to me, well, they would normally have a fundraiser and they would go around to businesses and ask them for sponsorships. Well, this year they weren't having a fundraiser. So what they did instead was they asked these businesses to join a Zoom meeting. And he also asked people on the school board and different other members of the community. And you know, it worked. They doubled the size of that club in 1 year. And I looked again, and they're holding on to those members and still continuing to grow. And of course, now they've diversified their base, they have more skills, and they're able to grow. So that's another example of a small club that turned it around. So thanks, Leanne.
Yeah, with very intentional steps. And they didn't try to do everything. They picked something very specific. Thank you so much, Herb. Great example. Terry, we got a couple questions like this, and I'd love for you to tell us, you know, why is moderate membership growth the goal? Why not aggressive membership growth?
Great question. You know, when I'm not doing this or playing with the grandkids, I have a little encore career part-time coaching small businesses. And you would be astonished at how much a small business of 30 employees looks like a Rotary Club of 30 members. They succeed for all the same reasons, they fail for all the same reasons. And I advise my clients, let's grow at a rate that we can accommodate. Let's grow at a rate that we can tolerate without the wheels falling off. I've seen countless scenarios where a business went out and got a whole bunch of business and absolutely swamped out their ability to deliver. I've seen clubs do the same thing, go out and grow by 50% in the course of a year. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you absorb a 50% increase in membership and get those people engaged and involved and invent service projects fast enough to absorb that kind of surge. So my suggestion is, let's go at it without flash, without sizzle, consistent, moderate membership growth. Consistent mean every year, moderate meaning something in the 5 to 10% range. I believe you'll be a lot more successful if you go at it that way, absorb those new members, onboard them, engage them, and then go get the next round of new members the next year.
Louisa, we have a couple questions about new clubs that I'd love for you to answer, and I'm so glad people are thinking about this. One person wanted to know if a small area with multiple clubs should consider merging, and another person wanted to know about the relationship between clubs with one another. Are clubs in competition with one another, or is there a different way to think about this relationship? Sure, Terry, you want to take that one?
Yeah, this idea of clubs competing with each other, your situation may be different, but where I live, we have 11 Rotary clubs in the same county. And most of them are clustered around a metro area and some of the area suburbs. And I hear this every now and then. You know, the reason we can't grow Rotary in Greenville, South Carolina is because there are too many clubs, they're all going after the same people. And when that comes up, I just look at that person and I say, tell me the name of the last person you were hard after where some other Rotary Club picked your pocket. This is mostly a myth, and myths do have an attribute of being excuses. Our penetration is so low in any market we're in, less than 1%, 0.5% of the available population is in Rotary. So the idea that somebody is being pursued by more than one Rotary Club, and I just don't see it happen. In my experience, I've rarely ever seen two Rotary clubs after the same prospect. The problem is that neither Rotary Club is going after any prospects.
Or we're not giving people choice. I think it's always important to encourage people to check out all of the Rotary clubs in an area and give them that opportunity to see where will their passions best be enabled.
We have two clubs in a remote area, not in Greenville County, One of them's a breakfast club, one's a lunch club. They do their membership events together. When they're doing a membership information hour, they invite the prospects together because frankly, a prospect for a breakfast club and a prospect for a lunch club are two completely different people. They don't compete at all. The product is different.
Louisa was there. I'm so glad you're back. Is there anything else you wanted to add to this idea of clubs in towns and how they can support one another?
Well, I think we're going to talk a little bit about what clubs need to do as far as looking internally and externally. And there may be situations where more collaboration makes sense. In fact, I think it's very powerful when clubs in an area do work together. We see more of that than we used to, I think, in the past. And so I always encourage that. I know of clubs that even share a committee. So for example, several clubs in one area that I know of have a common international services committee. And that's a very effective way to both leverage funds, leverage leadership and people, and show the community a level of collaboration that they may not be used to that can also be very engaging for people. So it's, again, as Doug said earlier, create some new boxes.
Well, we're going to go to Doug right now because a lot of people talked about wanting to change, but having people standing in the way. And Doug, I know you're an expert in the growth mindset and thinking through this. So I'd love for you to give us all ideas of when you and groups of people are excited to change and there's that group that just won't budge.
So a very long time ago when I still had all of my hair and none of it was gray, a very wise older man taught me a powerful lesson that has stuck with me. And essentially, the nub of that lesson is that any effective organization that is truly diverse needs to have all kinds of personalities. And that includes people who want to hurry up and change and people who don't want to change at all. And our responsibility as leaders, we have to find the sweet spot that exists in the middle of those people and manage it to move forward. There are quite naturally people who don't want to change, and quite frankly, they have every right to stay the same. The problem that happens with many of those people is they believe, too many of those believe that their right to stay the same means nobody else can do things differently. So we have to find ways to work with those people. Maybe it's a traditional group within a club or a more traditional club to help them understand that they have a right to stay the same, but they don't have the right to get in the way of other people who want to do things differently. And it's a piece of the point that Terry made earlier on, which totally resonated with me because I agree with him, is the change needs to be at a pace that makes sense to you and your group and in your community. His example of 5 or 10% is a really good way of looking at it. Take it on at a way that works and not be afraid to be going slowly as long as it's intentional and it's persistent.
Can I add to that one, Leanne, a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the other thing that we didn't have time to talk about today, which I think we will be doing probably in our third presentation in November, is another way that traditional clubs can grow significantly, and Terry alluded to this with the Impact Club discussion, is creating an alternate experience. Okay, and you know, a very traditional club who really likes their lunchtime meetings and their fellowship can create an alternate experience for people that would be at a, you know, and it may not even be as Terry says, it may not even be a meeting, but it might be a happy hour, it might be something like that. And then they work together on service projects and things like that. So that's another way to think about the problem as well.
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions. We have so many more, including, you know, when people can't afford dues. And I wish we had more time to talk through these, but we do have more sessions where I know we'll dig a little deeper. So this is just the first webinar in the 3-part series. And now we're going to have Terry tell us more about what we can all expect from the next webinar, which we've titled Work Smarter, Not Harder to Grow Your Club.
Thanks, Leanne. You know, every investment fund's promotional mailer ends up with something like past performance is not indicative of future results. Well, in business and in Rotary, the reverse is usually true. In the case of a Rotary Club, past performance is highly indicative of future results. In fact, a club that's been growing over the past 3 years has an 80% likelihood of continuing to grow in the coming year. I'll say that again. A club that's been growing over the past 3 years has an 80% likelihood of continuing to grow. I've studied this across 1,000 Rotary clubs. Sadly, a club that's been declining over the past 3 years also has an 80% likelihood of continuing to decline. You've heard success breeds success. Sadly, failure also breeds failure. So even more interesting, the rates at which clubs lose members and attract members is very consistent from year to year as well, unless something changes. So do you think it'd be helpful to know which group your club falls into? Would it be helpful to know how many members you're likely to need to replace this year? You will lose members for reasons you can't do anything about. Would you like to know what that number is of members that you will probably lose because of life happens reasons? It takes a whole lot less problem solving energy if you know exactly what problem you're trying to solve. So join us next month to learn what problem your club needs to solve. Is it low retention? Is it insufficient attraction of new members? Is it both? Is it neither? If it's neither, you just want to double down on what you're doing. Don't mess it up. Focus on what's working and keep doing those things. So here's a sneak preview of what that information will look like in the form of a goal-setting worksheet that is unique to your club. From this worksheet, you'll know exactly the rate at which your club has lost members over the past 3 years. And more importantly, you'll know the number of members you'll likely need to replace this year. Of course, the total number of members you need to attract is the total number needed for replacement of those likely departures, plus the number by which you intend to grow. So registration is open for that session, September 28th, and we hope you'll join us. So Louisa, can you tell us about the final segment of this 3-part series?
I sure can, and that's the one that I'm most excited about, even though the next one about data is so critical. I think the third one is going to bring it all together for you. It's the so what, the what next of what's going to happen. And we have a slide that shows you a little bit about that. You often hear people say that if you can take away one really good idea, then that's a successful session. So we think you need to take away one really good idea. And in this case, it's a 4-part idea, so it cheated a little bit. The first one, the I of idea, is that you really need to look internally. And that's what you're going to be doing the next time. You're going to have this sheet to look internally, and you'll see my little Rotarier there looking in the mirror and thinking he's seeing himself for real. He's not a real dog, but he sees something a little bit different. We do that in Rotary. We don't look in the mirror enough. We don't get that accurate, honest picture of where we are. We're going to help you do that. So that's the I. The D is around determining what's going on around you. Look outside. Look at the external environment. Look at opportunities for partnerships, opportunities where there are gaps of things that aren't being served. And how can you help to address some of those things? Use your imagination. This is the year for imagination. And that's that scan of what's going on around you to really know what's possible for you to do. And then the E is around exploring those gaps. What are the gaps? What are the opportunities? What are the ones that fit with our club? What aligns with our work? What new boxes can we have, or what boxes do we need to keep the way they are? So that's going to be a critical part of the what next. And then of course the A, no surprise, it's take action. So there's my little dog flying. His ears are flapping. You're up in the air with excitement and ready to fly with whatever the ideas are that you have. And to know that, again, there is that intention to make that happen, and there is support. So you will see that in our team, we've got zone leaders. We have people that have had the district level leadership with membership and innovative club advocacy. There are many people that can support you on this, and we want to make sure that those teams are available and that we are available to you. So that's your one big idea that gives you a little teaser for what's coming in the third session. So that brings us to a close for today. And so we thank you very much for joining us. The dates are there for the next ones. All of us are certainly more than happy to support and to try and answer questions that you may have, or to do presentations as we can with other places, other clubs. We'll be happy to try and do our very best to support you as we can. So please reach out, and I'll turn it back to Leanne to draw us to a close with the final thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for making the time to be here today. I know it's not convenient for all of you, so we're really, really pleased that you were able to join us. And to our panelists, really wonderful learning from you today. So hope to see everyone in the next webinar. Thank you so much. Bye.